Sudan, once Africa's biggest country, has been in conflict for so many years. When South Sudan became independent last July, it was supposed to usher in a new period of peace and stability in the region. The mainly African South and predominantly Arab North fought almost 40 years over the past 6 decades. The conflict was over differences in ideology, politics, resources, land and oil. The most recent war raged from 1983 to 2005. The fighting killed an estimated 2 million people and displaced another 4 million. But Sudan is still highly unstable, with a continuing humanitarian crisis in Darfur in the west and fighting in the oil-rich regions bordering South Sudan, together known as the Three Areas. The country is also recovering from a conflict in the east. And now southern Kordofan, a region that used to be the geographical center of Sudan, but when the South won independence, it found itself on the southern border. At its heart is the Nuba Mountains, where some 50 black African tribes have lived for thousands of years. There was heavy fighting in the region during the North-South Civil War, but the comprehensive peace agreement that ended that conflict never resolved its status. Now there's fighting there once more in one of the most remote corners of a vast country. Let's welcome Al Jazeera's Peter Gresti now. He's one of the very few journalists who have gained access to the remote region. Peter, it's been very difficult to form a clear picture of what's happening in southern Kordofan. Why is this conflict not getting the world's attention?
Well, for one very simple reason, and that's because it is so incredibly difficult to get to. You can't get in through Khartoum. They simply won't grant permission to anyone. So the only way in is by road from the south, and that's it's an incredibly long and arduous journey over some of the toughest roads I've ever experienced. It is a very, very difficult route to take. But once you get there, what you find is a humanitarian disaster unfolding of really quite startling proportions. Here's what we found.
Another Nuba family grieves. A wife and mother of 2 has been killed. She was cut down as she fetched water by a bomb dropped from the anonymity of a circling Sudanese Air Force plane.
I'm the first one to see my wife there. When I'm come back, I've told the people that my wife is gone. But no problem. We are fighting. The courage they want to give us the fighting until we are on now.
The grieving is everywhere. In other parts of the Nuba Mountains, entire villages have been rubbed out. All the work of Sudanese troops.
This is what a scorched earth policy looks like. This is the town of Bram. It used to be an administrative center of about 5,000 people. A few months ago, the Sudanese army came through here and all of the villagers fled into the mountainside. The army destroyed every building. They set fire to each home. They burned the crops, the grain stores. They destroyed the lot. This is now a ghost town.
It's not just homes that have gone. The Nuba people see this as nothing less than an attempt to erase their entire culture, to smudge out both the people and their memory.
One of the problems for people living out here is the apparent randomness of the attacks from the air. Now, the government insists that it's only targeting rebel positions, military posts, but we've seen the remains of bomb fragments, of bomb craters in villages, by waterholes in fields and so on, with no obvious military objective anywhere near it.
Right across the Nuba Mountains, whole communities have been forced to flee. We went to find them. Some of them have escaped over the border into South Sudan, but the UN estimates that more than 250,000 are still here, hiding from what they say is genocide. With the villages and fields now simply too exposed, people have taken refuge in high ground among the boulders where only a direct hit might harm them.
Doesn't look like much, but this hole down here is very typical of the kind of place that a lot of the villagers have retreated to. These hills are scattered with these extraordinary caves, and people have relocated their entire lives from the plains up into these areas. Their bedding, their living areas, their kitchens.
And the numbers hidden in the cracks and crevasses are startling. Entire communities are here. These people relocated en masse from the village of Tess, several thousand of them. They're all complaining of the same problems. There's no food here, no water, no sanitation. They've been denied all the basic necessities for survival and human dignity. Rauda Jadiri has been here for almost 9 months. She brought her 2 children after the army destroyed their village and burned their home. Her third, Muhammad, was born inside the mountain. Food is now critically short up here. The random bombings have made it too dangerous to work the fields. Last season's crop was about 1/3 of what it should have been, and few are willing to risk going back now. The UN reckons that in a few months, 300,000 people will be starving, and Khartoum refuses to allow aid agencies in. It says they're not needed. And so the Nuba are damned if they plant and damned if they don't.
What happens to the community if you're not able to plant this coming rainy season?
And so the rebels are recruiting. Theirs is a volunteer army of farmers, of traders and shopkeepers. They're armed for now with sticks. Their recruiters make no distinction over gender or religion. Almost every family has someone who's joined the Sudan People's Liberation Army North.
To the Nuba people, of course, this is about self-defense. It's about survival. To Khartoum, though, this is an armed insurrection. It's a treasonous act of defiance against the authority of the state.
This is the Sudanese army at work. The video, presumably shot by a government cameraman, shows Khartoum's troops locked in gun battles with rebel fighters. The rebels found the video at an army base they captured last year and gave it to Al Jazeera. The footage documents the military operation, hunting the mountainside and searching villages for rebel fighters or their supporters. But here's what bothers the rebels. Ahmed Haroun, in civilian clothes, is the governor of southern Kordofan. He's also wanted by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity and war crimes committed in Darfur. Here he addresses government troops before an attack. He tells his men, "You must hand over the place clean, swept, rubbed, crushed. Don't bring them back alive. We have no space for them." "Don't bring them back," repeats the army commander. "Eat them raw." Haroun off camera then says, "We don't want any administrative cost. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? I watched the video with the rebels' second-in-command, General Jogot Mekwa.
أنا يعني كلام اللي بيقوله محمد هارون ده كلام ما إنساني، ده إنسان هو داير يبيد ناس، ده إنسان عاقد على البشرية، وعشان كده أنا بقول من جانبنا كلام اللي هو بيقوله، وهو يمكن ده السبب اللي هو مطلوبه في المحكمة، لأنه هو بيدي توجيهات عشان ما يكون في زان حي، وحتى ناس بيشجعوا الناس يأكل ناس يعني.
The rebel training continues at a secret base. Assault rifles have replaced the sticks as they rehearse field tactics. The Nuba people have been through this before, fighting for 20 years until a peace agreement ended the last round of violence in 2005. They're not short of ammunition either.
The SPLA North insists it has no external supporters, nobody to supply it with weapons. So where does all this stuff come from? Well, General Jogot says he gets it from his best supplier, which is the Sudanese army itself. These machine gun rounds, the tank rounds, were all captured in fighting just over 3 weeks ago.
Khartoum says that's rubbish. It accuses South Sudan of being the rebels' main supplier, of arming the rebellion to undermine the government. Regardless of who supplies the ammunition, the rebels say they're using it to fight for political reform, not independence.
The original people in the Sudan, if you go through the history of the Sudan, we are not going to leave the Sudan for who? We're fighting, we want to change the regime, we want to bring the equality and justice for these people. Marginalized people, they don't have a freedom, they don't have justice, they don't have rights. That's why we fight for. We want to change this regime.
General Jogot rallies his troops. The wet season is about to begin, and they're expecting Khartoum to launch an offensive before the rains make the roads impassable. They are under-equipped and outgunned, but they are fighting for land they were born on and a cause they believe in.
Well, joining us now for this special program on the crisis in southern Kordofan is in Khartoum, Mustafa Osman Ismail, a senior advisor to Sudan's President Omar al-Bashir and a former foreign minister from 1998 to 2005. Mr. Ismail, thank you so very much for speaking to Al Jazeera. We appreciate you coming on the show. The armed struggle arose because of a long historical neglect of the Nuba people, marginalization, discrimination and abuses against the Nuba people. So in a sense, there is a case to be made by the SPLA North rebels who say they're fighting for basic rights, they're fighting for dignity. My question to you is, sir, why has the Khartoum government not addressed their grievances? Why have they been integrated and assimilated into Sudanese society?
Part of their basic right is human right, democracy, and to govern themselves. According to the CBA, we accepted that elections should take place and fair and free elections should run. We did that, they refused it. Instead of that, they decided to take arms against the government. That is what they are doing now. The CBA said that after the 9th of July, the declaration of the separation of the South, there should be no militia. There should be only two armies. The army of the South in the southern Sudan territory and the army of the North in the northern Sudan territory. They refused to disarm their militia. They refused to recognize the election, although the election being recognized by the international community. They decided to take arms and to fight.
Okay.
They want not only to have their rights in the Nuba Mount, but they want to topple the government in Khartoum. That's what they are saying now. They create, they create a front. This front is made from not only from the Nuba Mount, but also from the Nuba Mound, from Darfur rebels, and from the Blue Nile.
Well, I'd like to bring in our other guests, if we can, Mr. Osman. We can now speak also to Mr. Mukesh Kapila, who is the former UN envoy to Sudan, and he currently is with the Aegis Trust, joining us live from New York. Mr. Kapila, now you were the outspoken head of the UN when the Darfur conflict began 9 years ago. Is there a parallel between the situation in southern Kordofan today and what happened in Darfur in 2003 and early 2004, in your opinion?
Thank you, and good to be here, and also to hear my old friend Minister Osman, who was foreign minister during my time as UN chief. In response to your question, the situation in southern Kordofan, as I witnessed for myself last month, is even worse than Darfur. What I saw for myself was not just the use of Antonov bombings and scorched earth policies, but also the use of anti-personnel landmines and cluster bombs. 10 years after Darfur, of course, the technology of war has strengthened, and the regime in Khartoum is using that with a vengeance, cleansing whole tracts of the countryside of the Nuba Mountains, with thousands and thousands of them now refugees in South Sudan.
Mr. Osman, what do you respond to that? We have indeed heard reports, and Al Jazeera has also witnessed civilians being targeted by the Sudanese armed forces, the SAF, civilian targets and civilian infrastructure being targeted in the Nuba Mountains. Why is the Sudanese government targeting civilians?
Mukesh Kapila himself told me he wrote wrong reports because he been forced by people in Washington and in New York to do so. But let me go to your question about the Nuba Mound. Let us look into the root cause of the problem. We are not against sending humanitarian assistance to the needed people. We are against feeding rebels in order to fight the legitimate government. The root cause of the Nuba Mound is not because the government in the north refused to give them their legitimate right. The root cause is because they refused to accept the results of the election, which been recognized by the international community, which is part of the CBA.
So by fighting these rebels, Mr. Osman, you are at the same time bombing and starving civilians in the Nuba Mountains in the name of fighting an armed insurrection. Surely that constitutes crimes against humanity.
No credible government will attack and kill their people. You know, war is war. Sometimes, as it used to happen in Darfur, rebels make the civilian as shelters. And if there is war, which means that there is casualty. Look at what is going on in Iraq. Look at what is going on in Afghanistan. Look at what is going on in all over the world. That is why I'm saying that let us look into the root cause of the war.
Let me just pick up on that point, Mr. Osman, if I can. You say civilians are casualties. If they are indeed casualties, then what is the Sudanese government doing to assist the women and children who have been trapped in caves in the Nuba Mountains with no food or water for the last 9 months? If indeed you are just fighting an insurrection, then why not allow aid in to southern Kordofan to assist these women and children hiding in caves once again for months on, with no water, with no food, and very little access to the outside world?
This is absolutely wrong. In fact, what we are doing, we are cooperating with the African Union, with the United Nations, and with the Arab League. There is a trilateral initiative which is going on now. We are discussing it, but still, until we reach to an agreement on that, the Nuba Mound, we are now sending food, we are now sending medicine, we are now sending water. We think that the civilian, as much as possible, they should not be harmed with what is going on. But the root cause of the problem should be tackled.
Okay.
The root cause is that the rebels, they refuse the result of the election. They want to topple the government. This is what we should tackle it.
Mr. Kapila, you were recently in southern Kordofan. Is what Ms. Osman saying right? Is food, water getting access to the civilians of the Nuba Mountains?
I'm very disappointed in my good old friend, Mr. Osman. It must be very, very difficult to be an advisor to a genocidal head of state. What I saw in southern Kordofan, and it's not just me, is what he's saying is an absolute pack of lies. If that was the case, we would not be seeing a deserted countryside. We would not be seeing black charred fields. We would be seeing seeds being planted as the rains come, and yet that is not happening. We would not be seeing thousands and thousands of women and children living in caves, as I saw for myself, and as refugees, as I saw for myself, and we would not be seeing anti-personnel landmines and anti-tank bombers, as we saw for myself. And if Mr. Osman is right, then why doesn't he allow independent, impartial access to the region, which he will not do? And if he wants to understand the root causes, then why does he not understand that it is the policies of Khartoum going back several years? And most recently, the acceleration of the conflict in Nuba started with the ascension to power of the governor of South Kordofan, Haroun, last year, who, of course, is indicted by the International Criminal Court as well.
Mr.
Kapila,
if I can just interrupt you if the situation, as you say, is as desperate for the civilians in the Nuba Mountains, then why the inaction from the international community? Why no additional pressure on the Khartoum government to allow in humanitarian aid? There seems to be a certain Sudan fatigue within the international community. Wouldn't you agree?
I think there is international pressure being applied on Khartoum. Obviously, a lot of diplomacy must be going on behind the scenes, and civil society groups and activities are taking place. But clearly, it is very, very difficult to do anything in the Nuba Mountains without the consent of the government of Khartoum. Therefore, I think it is necessary to look at alternative measures, including cross-border aid and other things like that, so that the unfortunate civilians of the Nuba will not starve over the coming months. I think hunger is getting worse and worse in the Nuba, and we are going to see much more serious conditions unfold in coming weeks.
Okay, Mr. Osman, in Khartoum, will the Khartoum government allow humanitarian aid into the Nuba Mountains to help these civilians that are trapped by this conflict?
Our Minister of Social Affairs, she was in New York. She met with the people in New York and also with some representative of the permanent governments, and they are working closely here with UN, with Africa Union, and with Arab League. There is an initiative of trilateral part. We are negotiating it. But now there is no problem at all for any humanitarian assistance to come to the Nuba Mount and to the Blue Nile. But it got to come through the government.
While these discussions and negotiations are going on, Mr. Osman, people are suffering. While these discussions are going on, people are suffering in the Nuba Mountains. We've seen it with our own eyes. It's not just Mr. Kapila. We, Al Jazeera, have been to southern Kordofan. We have seen it once again with our own eyes of the Sudanese armed forces once again targeting civilian areas, people having to flee into mountains. So there is a desperate situation going on here, and the Khartoum government doesn't...
Tell me this. Do you think why the government of Sudan targeting civilian? Have you any answer?
But it's my question to you, in fact.
Civilian?
Why are you targeting civilians?
We are not targeting civilian. War is war. And the reason why there is war, because the rebels who are supporting by Kabilas and others, they are fighting in South Kordofan. They are refusing the election. War is war. But those who are fighting, who are declaring war in south of Kordofan, they got to be, this question should be put for them. If they want democracy, we are ready for democracy. If they want political settlement, we are ready for political settlement. But these people, they are taking civilian as shelter. If you have any humanitarian support and you want to send it to the needy people in the Nuba Mount, whether to come from Qatar or from Saudi Arabia or from Washington or from New York, we are ready to take it to them now.
Okay, well, thank you very much for speaking to us, Mustafa Osman Ismail in Khartoum and Mukesh Kapila in New York. Thank you both for joining us. And thank you so much for watching this special program on Sudan's southern Kordofan. If you want to catch the show again online, just log on to our website, aljazeera.com. And we'll leave you now with images from southern Kordofan, photographs taken by Al Jazeera's Peter Gresti. Thanks for watching.